Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Identity Week Asia. With us, we have experts all over the world who are going to share their insights on what we call strong authentication solutions. On the panelists, I would love to introduce to you Abhijit Kulkarni. Within 1 minute, please tell us your name and what you do and your organization. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hi Catherine. As Catherine said, my name is Abhijit Kulkarni. I am VP for Asia Pacific at TeleSign. TeleSign is a market leader in digital identity and programmable communications. So that's a brief introduction from my side.
Thank you. May we hear from Alok?
Thanks, Catherine. Hey, everyone. This is Alok here. I'm head of the product for Gojek Identity platform. Gojek is Southeast Asia ride-hailing and food delivery service. Along with ride-hailing and food delivery, we do a bunch of other products in the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Alok. Can we hear from Jeremy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Jeremy. I'm a senior systems engineer specializing in privileged access management. I work for Boehringer Ingelheim, one of the biggest pharmaceuticals, the biggest family-owned one, more specific. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yusuf? Sorry, Yusuf, please unmute yourself.
Sorry. Yeah, this is Yusuf. I'm currently working with the Dubai Digital Authority as the lead architect in digital identity and trust services. I'm mainly responsible for the identity and access management track here for the governance, planning, roadmap for the identity and access management related, and working as kind of a senior, subject matter expert in identity and access management domain.
Interesting. May we hear from June?
Hi, Catherine. Thank you. My name is June. I'm an APEC Market Development Director at FIDO Alliance. FIDO means Fast Identity Online. So FIDO Alliance is an open industry association with about 300 members from all over the world. We were launched back in 2013 with a mission to reduce our dependency on password. So our members come from internet platform, device manufacturer, online security, finance, banking, government, and so on and so on.
Interesting. Thank you so much, our dear panelists. Allow me to introduce myself as well. My name is Catherine Nabala. I'll be your moderator for today, and I'm on the steering committee of Decentralized Identity Foundation. DIF is a joint development foundation project that was started to oversee IPR code development content from member organizations in the decentralized identity space. Without further ado, dear viewers, please make use of the chat room to ask any questions or clarifications as our panelists share their insights. So right now, we've seen that during this COVID pandemic, a lot of businesses really need to authenticate and verify their end user. So we are looking at what we call strong authentication. So in your own opinion, what are the emerging trends of strong authentication solutions happening around the world, and what are the businesses trying to use nowadays? I think let's start from Abhijit.
Thanks. That's the advantage you have when your name starts with A. You get always the first opportunity. But jokes apart, indeed, businesses are going online. Everything is going digital, and now businesses are actually onboarding customers who they don't know about. So authenticating an end user is very important. Let's take my example. I joined TeleSign 6 months back, and when I was onboarded in TeleSign, when I was given access to various internal systems platforms, I was doing it with my private mobile phone. That's how it was. And you had to, authenticating an end user, knowing what the identity of an end user is very important. Earlier, everything was password, right? You have a username, you have a password, and everything is done. But the emerging trends are very clear. One is that people are going for multi-factor authentications. They don't want to authenticate using a single factor. They want a password with an OTP plus maybe some other factor like a mobile-based authenticator or something of that sort. The other thing is the businesses are actually looking at, since everybody is going digital, everybody is basically going online. You're leaving a footprint, a digital footprint across. You do your transactions, you communicate, you do person-to-person communication, person-to-business communication. You do your transactions, you do your shopping, whatnot, and you leave your digital footprint. So there are attributes associated with those digital footprints that can create an identity for an end user. And there are a lot of trends where people are using these attributes to basically authenticate an identity of an end user, which is maybe more frictionless, where end user really don't have to remember passwords, and they don't have to even have the the pain to basically go through an OTP, enter an OTP, or things like that. So from that perspective, future of authentication is more towards creating some sort of a process where the end user doesn't have to actually get involved in any of the process.
I see. Yeah, okay. And Jeremy, do you have anything to add on to that? Or
Yeah,
Alok?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. Abhijit mentioned something about digital footprints, right? Like cookies or trails that we leave behind.
Yeah.
And I think the general trend for most organizations right now, and I know that a lot of them say, AI, ML, and all that. But adaptive security is something that I've noticed. When especially when people are going to the cloud, right? For example, Microsoft Azure has several different platforms and services that enable us to take a look at these cookie crumbs, to take a look at these trails that people leave behind to see, okay, this is the user, this is their usual behavior. Oh, we noticed that they're suddenly logging in from a different location. What can we tell about that? How can we react? So definitely, as our authentication technology improves, as having biometrics, so on and so forth, the reliance on data to see user behaviors, to create more streamlined ways for them to authenticate. So for example, if they're using their usual mobile phone from the usual location, they'll be able to log in seamlessly. If they notice a different IP address, they'll be able to be prompted for a second factor authentication. So just to add from Abhijit is saying, definitely a reliance now on data in conjunction with the rise of more modern authentication.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree as well. Alok, do you have something to add on to that?
Oh, for sure. So Abhijit and Jeremy talked about the need for authenticating people, right? How I see this is the need is not just for allowing users to access their accounts or systems or businesses online, but also for businesses to understand their customers better, their needs better, so that they can target these customers using specialized promotions, offers, products, and communications across different communications related to different businesses. Now, traditionally, the authentication mainly relied on two things. One is the user identifier, how users identified on the system, and two, secret information, which is known by only by the user. Now, more and more authentication systems have started relying on the third thing, which is what the businesses know about the customer. Now, these are external signals which were basically coming into the ecosystem when a business and a user are interacting with each other. Things like what kind of device user is trying to log in or access a business, what kind of IP address user has, what kind of operating system user has, what kind of network user is on, and whatnot. Now, when these three things are combined together, it really creates a powerful mechanism of identifying these users uniquely and target them uniquely onto the platform. And that's why there are more and more emerging trends coming along on around the mobile authentication, which is the new big thing across the planet, as more and more business and consumer applications are moving to mobile first ecosystem and mobile apps based ecosystem. And that's where you will see a lot of biometric authentication is happening, a lot of authentication where we work directly with telco data and Android and iOS data as well. So all this requires us to work not just directly, not just have a relationship between business and the user, but have a very tight coupling in a relationship between user, business, device OEM, operating system author, which is Google and Apple, and then the telco companies come into the play, and then there are telco data providers as well, which are coming into the play. So all this together forming a really interesting piece on how the authentication world is changing in the 21st century.
Interesting. So, what I've observed out of the three insights shared are rotating around user experience. So, that really triggers my question like, how do we ensure seamless authentication as well as improving or making sure that security is not compromised? Because most of the times, when we are really like focusing on the user experience, security concerns come into hindrances, especially along the user journey. So with that, I'm really curious about June, what you have to say about that, especially from your background of FIDO Alliance.
I was super focused on number one question. You jumped in number two. It's okay.
Go ahead.
just,
And
just, just,
follow on.
just, just, to, just to break
You
the
can
ice.
still add
So
on
no, no,
in the
no
previous
worries,
question.
no worries. Yeah. So all of us are aware of the fact that there is challenge between usability and security. These two things are funny things. When we try to make one a little better, then the other thing always fall behind. So with the password, both the usability and the security are not so good. So people came up with something called OTPs, right? One-time password. So we could carry around these one-time password generator that needs to be we need to type in numbers or something called the passcode sometimes. So this is a little better than just password, right? In terms of security, but usability, it still gets worse. So SMS-based OTPs, of course, increase the usability and then security just a little bit. But once again, we know that from all the media, exposing the incidents, and we know that there are so many weaknesses associated with the SMS-based OTPs as well. So for the Alliance, we set out to solve this problem by creating an open online authentication standard that enable you to have a stronger authentication using asymmetric public key cryptography and allow you to authenticate using a single gesture with a possession-based authentication token. So you use your own device, your smartphone, your laptop, PCs, and continue on with the method that you already use for unlocking your device. So not so much additional learning curve involved, and not so much new cost involved. So but still it guarantees a higher level of security and usability compared to passwords or OTPs.
I agree as well. Okay, thank you so much, June. Yusuf, do you have anything to add on to that? In your own opinion, how should we really enable seamless authentication, whereas without compromising on security?
Sure. First of all, I totally coincide with June's comment about there is always a trade-off between the security and usability when we are talking about authentication, because obviously there has to be a great balance between both of them, because most of the time security and usability should go hand in hand, and especially when you are introducing multiple factors or more secure authentication mechanism. Obviously it also depends upon like the business criticality and the user awareness. I could say user awareness is also one of the key. Gartner itself identifies now user in two categories: customers as well as employees. So customers, which we call it CIM, and employees, they have a different way of interacting with the systems. So while when you are circumventing and creating some kind of new or strong authentication mechanism, it's very important to understand the audience. This is something beyond the technical we are talking about, and obviously understanding the complexity and criticality of the business to introduce the strong authentication factors. Maybe you introduce some factor which will eventually disrupt the experience and usability of that factor. Now talking about seamless, now we see that the market is now encompassed with a lot of product and services who are providing much more factors. I could say that initially people were always relying on I mean, this is like one factor where a secret, we call it password, known to both parties, and you claim it. So you can say the authentication is simply what is a corroboration of person's claim to an identity which is issued by an entity or an organization to prove that I am the one who is I am trying to prove. Now when it comes to the seamless, we have seen like there are a lot of other, I mean, as June has said, that starting with OTP based, then we have moved on to the smartphones. We also have introduced some other factor which identifies the user not based on something prompt to be asked, but maybe understanding the behavior traits or some kind of, uh, some kind of dynamics about the user as well as the environment. As you said that, okay, this user is always accessing from this particular geolocation at this particular amount of time. We know about this information, and we are seamlessly or silently can authenticate user to know that yes, this is the same user if he has already proved one or two factors. I could say smartphones in the last 1 or 2 decades, you have seen they have penetrated the market, especially, I mean, I know that today itself there are a lot of population who still does not have these smartphone, but it's still majority of the population since has gone it. The user experience has improved a lot in those smartphones. That has also become one of the key factor of introducing those other factor to provide a seamless authentication using all these smartphone enabled technologies. Fido is doing great job in enabling those smartphones, especially Fido 2 enabled smartphones are doing great job for improving the user experience at the same time providing the great security. So I could say in a nutshell that although there was always a dilemma between security and user experience to bring a greater or better security authentication mechanism, but at the same time these emerging technologies or the things coming in are helping the user to create or achieve a balance between both of them.
Interesting. So we've seen now like a balance between customers and also the workforce. Any other person who would like to clarify on that as well? Because in my experience now, like we are working from home, people or the authentication solution should be adaptive. For example, I might log out maybe 7 p.m., but before that I used to log out 5 p.m. So this is really like a little bit becoming more and more interesting. Alok, would you love to add up to that?
For sure, for sure. So Yusuf talked about using this additional signals, and I touched on this particular aspect as well. Essentially, adding third kind of signal into the equation. The first signal was the user identifier. The second was the secret, which is known to the user itself. Now, when this is complemented with the signals or the information businesses know about the customer, you can actually attempt to achieve the balance between the safety and the user experience. And this is one of the classical dilemma in the security and the identity industry. If you achieve more, you have to compromise on the other thing. And as head of the product for identity at Gojek, I also face this dilemma all the time. And that's where we try to use this additional signals in our system as well to see how we can complement the user experience without really compromising any of the on the security. A couple of examples. If we see a similar user coming onto the platform with all other kind of signals remaining same, we do not ask these users to authenticate themselves again onto the platform, thereby reducing the friction. When we see the couple of signals are changing and we doubt if the user is same, we do ask them to verify themselves using second and third factor based on what all user can provide. What all user can provide would depend on what kind of network user is on, what kind of device user is on, right? So all this additional signal which are provided by telecom companies, particularly telecom signals have become more and more critical because most of these authentications are happening on mobile devices now. And user has a SIM card on the phone, which typically has a data plan available as well, which really complements everything else which we during the authentication flow. So all of this supplemented by biometrics as well. Just a decade back, biometric authentication was considered too complex from consumer standpoint because it was kind of sci-fi movie, scanning eyes or scanning fingers. But now if you think about it, biometric sensors, touch ID, face ID is available on almost most of the new age smartphones. So all thanks to Google and Apple to making this technologies kind of mainstream, which sort of helped bridge the gap between technology adoption and customer trust. Because customer trust on a technology and technology adoption is more of a chicken and egg kind of situation where one thing has to happen before the other thing can happen. right? So with biometric authentication coming in, we are really able to achieve that fine balance between security and the user experience, where all user has to do is just scan their face or scan their finger, and boom, they are inside the system and can access their account. Particularly at Gojek, we do this at several times. When let's say when someone is doing a high value transaction on our financial system, we typically ask them to scan their fingers. All the drivers, before they actually take a ride onto the platform, we ask them for a live selfie verification so that we can verify the driver is indeed the same person who actually registered on the platform to drive and move users around. You really don't want Abhijit to be signing up onto the platform, but Alok instead driving by taking Abhijit's account, right? Because that is a huge concern from user safety standpoint. And all of this thing has been made possible because of the biometric authentication around live selfie verifications, touch ID verifications, and whatnot.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Alok. eKYC is really picking up, and one of the major factors or contributors to eKYC is actually your biometrics. It's your photo. Yeah, very well said.
Interesting. So I think we are all in agreement, but there is an issue right now. So we are all really seeing biometric authentication like almost solving all the pain points as of now to enable seamless authentication and all. But we forget that the people are actually the biometric data right now. So it's all rotating around people, and there is a major concern about security. So, in your opinion, with these biometric authentication solutions popping up, how should we ensure that user information is really like secure? And on that note, I think I would love to hear from Abhishek first.
Yeah, just while Alok was talking about, 10 years back, biometrics, nobody imagined, and, there was sci-fi movies around it. I was really scared when I saw MI2, it was, I think, Mission Impossible, where he basically replicates his, thumbprint impression, and he's able to execute things, which, frankly, I was a bit scared. But yes, with things really coming up, the way it's working today, it has become more secure. The biggest issue that I see in biometrics, which is a security flaw, is your password can be reset. Your biometrics cannot be reset. So that is the biggest challenge that you have with biometrics. Coming back to another form of biometrics that is really picking up is behavioral biometrics. So, for example, you have this SDKs in your mobile phones where it basically looks into your behavioral aspects. How are you typing? When you type A with your right or left thumb, what pressure are you applying to this to the screen and stuff like that? And that is also able to generate a profile, which then you can compare with. At the end of the day, what is authentication? You basically find something which is available about a person, create a profile around it, and then always compare with that profile basis the data inputs that you receive. So that is picking up as well. But what I feel is the future is all about multi-factor. There will be multiple factors. One thing that is emerging is, as Alok and Jeremy mentioned, was a mobile number. For example, a mobile number is the biggest unique identifier for an end user. Now, everybody has a mobile number. Now, that mobile number is associated with so many things. If you are able to verify that phone number with other attributes, and if you are able to then authenticate end user basis just that attributes and the logic that we have around it, along with the biometrics, that is something which is going to enhance the user experience, but at the same time, it is something which is going to increase the security aspect of it. That's my take on biometrics. That's my take on the overall ecosystem. But I genuinely feel biometrics is still something which we need to look at the storage perspective. Is it safe? Is it secure? Is it something that cannot be compromised? Then yes, biometrics is something for the future.
So if I may jump in here.
Sure.
So I think we need to distinguish the terms that we use here. Some people get confused about the terms that we use here, especially when we talk about the biometric. It's quite new, so there is some difference between biometric recognition and FIDO-based biometric authentication. I think what we are talking about here is the biometric authentication. So when we talk about the biometric recognition, it is something we call it as a match on server. Whether your whole scan or template, it goes to the server and make a match. So there's a higher risk of your personal information, personal features, or even privacy breach there. And then what FIDO is proposing is that something we call it a match on device. Your biometric data never leave your device at all. So it adds a extra layer of a privacy as well as a security, and knowing that your biometric templates cannot be stolen off your device and reused somewhere else. So I just want to clarify that.
Point. I may add some point here, although I totally agree with the insights Abhijit and Alok has put. June has, put a great aspect about, what match on server or match locally is going to do. I mean, being me myself as a technical lead of National Digital Identity Program here, where we are, registering the whole population here, uh, getting into first of all the passwordless solution and the digital identity countrywide, there we faced this problem, similar problem, where we are also introducing some kind of a biometric verification for a segment of users or people who are still not very much tech savvy about using smartphones, and they're still living with the old phones or something else. So here, our take is that we have identified, first of all, June has clearly said that when you talk about biometrics, there is definitely a place where your biometric data has to be registered or to be identified or locally stored somewhere. Then you will be doing always a match against that. There is always a problem that you, as Abhijit and Alok has clearly said, that once your data is compromised, you cannot change because it's your biometric data. So here, one of the thing which June has said, similar thing, we are also thinking about match on card nowadays. Now, because nowadays some of the technology providers are able to make some kind of smart cards where, I mean, thanks to these microprocessors for near field communication technologies. So there is a fingerprint scanner as part of these card itself, where when you want to verify your biometric, everything is in that smart card, and it happens locally on that card. So that means everything what is there is nowhere leaving that particular smart card or reaching to any server. Second layer, which I think from the technology point of view, that I feel that there are a lot of talk about unifying the format of the biometric data to be stored. I think there I could say that whenever this biometric data is stored, it should never be stored in a format which can be, reused, like especially the third party, when you are dealing with the third party system where you have to prove yourself by putting your fingerprint or face onto their slide, onto their SDKs or onto their devices, there is always a risk that they are capturing your actual act. They are doing verification, but at the same time, they may capture it. So here, I could say one of the key, I can say the cornerstone would be these national digital identity programs, which can offer these kind of biometric recognition as a service by introducing their own SDKs or on their. I mean, we have learned something similar from Aadhaar, Indian digital identity system, that I'm not quoting that there was any flaw or failure. I'm just saying that there was a chance where people were able to take the fingerprint of the people because they were using a third party consumer or third party devices. So here I could say the National Digital Identity Program can always play a key role in corroborating this, risk. At the same time, keeping the data not in a format which can be reused once a hacker or data is being stolen. It should not be in a format that can be reusable. Like for example, you can merge that data or modify that data or encrypt. Encryption is a single term,
Mhm.
but I could say modify that data in a format that it can be unlocked only with that particular set of keys. Once user wants to erase it or wants to reset it, there are replaceable biometric claims. I mean, I could name this term as a replaceable biometric claim, because this is a problem which Abhijit has clearly said. You cannot change your biometric because it is there. So once you are storing, especially when you are storing these data, keep it in a way which can be replaceable. So even if it is stolen, like, there is a chance. Yeah.
Kathy, may I add something on this topic?
Sure.
Everybody has mentioned, some of the vulnerabilities of using biometrics, how it can be spoofed by other people. But I want to tie the conversation, maybe just answer in, maybe into levels of analysis. June said something about, using a framework where their organization is proposing a framework. And we also mentioned a lot about mobile devices, but the ubiquity of mobile devices because they're very close to the users, they're very accessible, right? But majority of the users that we have right now are either falling into two categories, right? They're either Apple users or Android users, and most of the time they will be Android users. And I'm sure that Alok would agree that most of their drivers, most of their clients are using Android devices. But because this is an often open source software, right? And there are different types of players on the ground who have different interpretations of how to use biometrics. It's very important to tie back again. We have all these technologies, but we need a unifying framework on how to use these technologies. For example, for Google, right, they have guidelines on how to test whether their biometrics is being spoofed, the ability of false entries, for example, or the ability of hackers to get into that information. But they don't make it mandatory for these organizations to report the results of their testing for their biometrics. So that's one, definitely a framework for us to be equally on the same level. Say, okay, these are the hardware, these are the softwares, these are the underlying APIs that are interacting with each other. Let's come up with a framework to make sure that everybody is on the same page. That these are the best practices to make sure that biometrics don't get spoofed. And just to add on to what Yusuf said about yes, biometrics, you can never reset these, and that's why it's very important to store them in a way that nobody would be able to understand. But as I know, a lot of the ways that biometrics are being stored into phones is that they're a mathematical model, right? So, for example, you get a fingerprint, and then they forget about the fingerprint. They store the mathematical model of that. But again, because there are different players on the ground, we need to make sure, are we encrypting them in the same way? Are we making sure that this encrypting mechanism that we're using has a low probability of being cracked? So definitely, very exciting place to be especially when you're developing biometrics.
Jeremy, we
Wonderful.
welcome you to our biometric working group.
Interesting. Okay, so roughly rotating around how the information is stored and also frameworks to really gauge the strength of the storage, right? Alok, do you want to add on to that?
Around biometrics.
Right.
Yeah, I sort of agree to what everyone just said, right? Yeah, the technology is there and it's being used. A lot of business and consumer applications have been using biometric authentication lately, but this ton of work needs to be done, and at this stage there's no one solution fit all kind of category available. What we needed, I think June touched on this. There are a lot of scenarios where we need a server match on these biometrics, and there are a lot of scenarios where you can just live with device level match as well. And what is feasible, what is affordable, and what is acceptable by our customers, that has to be assessed based on a case to case basis, and then a particular solution can be deployed. Very simple. Whenever someone is trying to build an easy way to authenticate people, I think device level match just does the job, because you are outsourcing the job of authenticating a user to the device manufacturer, or the operating system, in this case Apple or Google. But when you can't really afford to outsource that job because either there's finances at stake or someone's life is at stake, you want to ensure that that authentication is being done at your services, and that's where the server level verification becomes really important. And I gave an example of how we do driver selfie verification before any driver picks up a rider. That if any business mess up at that stage, it can potentially lead to and harm to someone's life, and we can't afford to do that. And that's where capturing right set of information at the onboarding stage, as well as at every transaction stage, and how that calculation is done at a server level is very, very critical. Completely agree to what Jeremy also said. having a standardized algorithm and encryption methodology is very critical, and that's where I think June and his organization is coming into play, and FIDO Alliance is actually presenting a lot of standards to the entire world on how some of these verifications should be done. So yeah.
Cool, cool, cool. I wanted to really get your insight, especially on the product side, because I know for sure most of the times customers are really skeptical about that. So yeah, I think yeah, we now know exactly how to make sure this information will be secured. And I've noticed that most of the answers have been rotating around mobile authentication or using the mobile as the device. So why do you think it's trending right now? Why is it becoming sort of like a global norm? In your own opinion, especially with B2C environments? I'm sure Alo can attest to that. I would love to know your opinion. Why do you think it's really like booming as of now? Anyone can start.
I can go ahead first of all, since you mentioned my name there. The answer is very simple. Since most of the applications are available at that state, at that layer, at the mobile layer, right? So you basically want to leverage what is available with the user, and then try to authenticate or try to really understand that user with all the signals in that ecosystem. So just a decade back, when most of the people didn't have a mobile phone, most of the authentication systems either revolved around password-based systems because no other signal could be used on the desktop and a laptop environment, or they used to be physical keys. And I know a lot of organizations still use physical keys to pass on the first factor or second factor authentication. Now, because with mobile era, and when most of the applications are now moving to mobile first ecosystem, when you already have so many additional signals from a mobile devices, like the IP address, the mobile device location, encryption keys being powered by application and third-party SDKs, telco data. Why not leverage these information to complement the existing authentication solution?
Yes.
Really bring down the complexity of authenticating people, thereby increasing the user experience, on which we touched upon in the start of the conversation as well. So uh, the idea in a B2C environment is always to ensure how do we authenticate users in as less time as possible. And I'm using the time as an open-ended parameter, but what we are essentially trying to do is enhance the user experience. And I like to use one particular example. What we do today is when someone comes in and pass on their phone number on our app, we directly, rather than verifying that particular phone number using a classic old ways of OTPs, what we're trying to do is authenticate that particular phone number directly with the telco provider of that number, that hey, does this person or really have this particular phone number on their device or not. So this requires us to latch on the SIM card information, the IP address of the user, and then tie that back to the phone number. And trust me, all of this happens in a split second, and user is able to authenticate themselves under a second or two, and then go back to doing things why they come to the application for. Customers do not come to our applications like Gojek to verify themselves. Customer come to order food and order rides, and it's our job to ensure they are able to do that thing as soon as possible, rather than getting stuck at the authentication screens.
Agree,
Oh,
agree.
faster
Look, in
convenience.
fact, yeah, just to add on that, it's not only just verifying a number from a telco database. It's also to check if that SIM has been swapped over last 24 hours, last 48 hours. If the transaction volume is higher, you can in fact do these multiple checks, whereby you can do a subscriber verification, you can do a contact match, you can do a name match, and you can even do a match whereby you can check whether the SIM has been swapped or it has been recycled, in last 48 hours or last 6 months or whatever it is. So I agree. It's more to do with phone numbers and the way how you can use phone numbers to verify end user's identity. And again, that is frictionless, right? The end user don't have to do anything. It just he needs to give a consent at times, but That's it. It doesn't. It's nowhere involved in that entire authentication process. Yeah, indeed, I see that trend big time.
Can I answer that in the converse now? They are mentioning the B2C space, right? But since I work for a corporate, my clients are basically, internal employees, right? And my short answer there is that, mobile devices are just, and our reliance on them for authentication, it's just a reflection of how the workforce is changing. And in the case of Gojek, how the economy is changing, that's why people are relying on their cell phones. In the same manner, employees now are very mobile. They can go anywhere they want. They can work from anywhere they want, and therefore, the reliance on tokens and hard cards, that might be, something that might be phased out. Who knows? But yeah, definitely, if people are starting to work the way that they are, and I know because of COVID, we are changing the way we work. Mobile phones are here to stay. A lot of organizations and enterprises will leverage that to save costs, to be more convenient for their employees, and just convenient for everybody, I guess.
So if I can add, so Alok and Jeremy and Abhijit, I think you're right. The explosion of the mobile computing, things became much cheaper, reliable. That's one big factor. But if you look at our earlier vision of FIDO, as a FIDO Alliance staff member, I get to talk to these seniors that who started this movement, and then when I talk to them, they share this very interesting images they had when they started off. So if you look at the castle, and then if you imagine the like a knights or soldiers or citizens inside the castle, there's a different way to protect them, right? You can make the walls of a castle higher and higher and try to protect them, or you can try to put the armor, on their bodies, to the soldiers, or on the bodies of soldiers or the citizens there. So, just imagine the server is the castle, right? The wall of the server, and then the armor is their mobile phone, right? So, so that now we have a much reliable and affordable mobile computing devices. We can focus on these armors instead of the the castle of the wall.
Yeah, totally agree. June's comment on this, because these devices have a lot of computing power, which is making it also possible. And if we revolve around the same question about why mobile is becoming so prominent nowadays, is also one of the factor, because we all, Alok and Abhijit has clearly talked about SIM-based protection, which was there when the smartphones were all not there. But once the market has penetrated with the smartphones, it became much more easier for user to identify, to reach out, because the customer reachability is also one of the main concern for these direct B2C or CIM based products. At the same time, these smartphones also have changed the landscape about the user, you can say, user experience point of view. I mean, just think about our old system, mobile phones. The way the new smartphones provide you the interactiveness and promptness about your authentication is much more easier for all kind of customer segments. I mean, it's like now they don't need to know or learn a technology or something to authenticate themselves. Just they have a smartphone, and they are authenticating using those smartphones seamlessly without understanding the complexity about maintaining the credentials, remembering the passwords. So that has also contributed a lot for this smartphones or mobile phones to be used as authentication. And obviously the mobile has become like your second companion, so you take it everywhere, I mean almost everywhere. So
It's your
that's
personal,
also,
right? One person has one mobile. That's how it is. That's what Jeremy said. It's a
yes.
personal device, right? You can do whatever you want, and it's
Yeah,
in your control all the time.
just try to imagine that you come up with a novel authentication solution. I mean, we see that like more than 100 every year from individual or organization, and then try to provide the matching like hardware and software to everybody on the planet. That's a
It's
big
crazy.
challenge.
Agree. Very much agree.
Interesting. So I think we can all agree, and we know why it's now becoming a global norm. And I also agree as well. But as we agree, right, there are people who actually cannot afford mobile phones out there. So do you think that we are going to be leaving them out, or should we really think about this other part of the world? And So I see that some of the hindrances of using mobile phones is because of inclusion. So some people, believe me or not, there are some people like what Jeremy said, especially B2B or in the workforce. As an employee, sometimes I would not want to use my mobile phone for like enterprise solutions and all, right, like to log on to the workforce applications. I feel a little bit encroached on my privacy and maybe my other concerns. So how do you think we shall like devise solutions, or what do you think about these other people who are really like left out or who do not really want to use mobile phones, since almost everything we've discussed right now rotates around the device as the mobile phone? Um,
I'd like to take
Good.
take the initiative here and mention a case study. I think it's in Nigeria, if I am not mistaken, maybe Kenya, where they have M-Pesa. M-Pesa,
right. Yes.
it's a mobile banking application, but uses very simple phones, right? And I understand that inclusion is going to be a big issue because we have all these technologies, right, coming out, and the hardware to support them is going to be very difficult to finance, right? But if countries in Africa can be able to authenticate themselves through simple SMS or using some sort of injected application, perhaps like how they do it in M-Pesa, then I think it will be possible to still be inclusive. However, the reason why people are moving away from these kinds of models in the first place is because of security, but you have to balance out the risk. Is the amount of transactions that they are doing right now enough to justify just using these primitive types of authentication? And maybe if yes, if the phone gets stolen or something, they forget their SIM card, then we have to provide a support system for that. And in the case of M-Pesa, I think you can do it with agents or what have you. They have people on the ground that actually service these people when they actually need to give money and all that. So just as a case study that I want to mention for,
Yeah,
especially
in
for
fact,
refugees.
yeah. In fact, Jeremy, it's very close to my heart because I come from Vodafone and I was involved in that project in Africa. So from that perspective, yes, M-Pesa is one. The other example I can give is, rural India, where actually people go with their phones to basically, increase credit on their phones. And what they do is they basically make a payment, and then their phone basically gets charged, or the credit gets charged. Same thing is a remittance business that is happening. So if phones are actually penetrating into the rural parts of Nepal, Bangladesh, India, Nigeria, I think it would make more sense for governments to fund these kind of phones, secure phones for end users, rather than getting an infrastructure which is something which is parallel to maybe the mobile ecosystem. That's what my personal thoughts are. Maybe I'm more biased because I've been a mobile operator guy throughout my life, but I think that would make more sense in terms of and cheap phones are available. You can get phones within $2, $3 range now. So I think they should promote phones. Government should promote phones rather than basically creating an infrastructure which is, in a way redundant to the phone infrastructure.
I have a bit of a different opinion on this particular topic. While I do agree that the phones have really become cheap, but there's still a mass number of users who still do not have access to mobile phones, and for a foreseeable future still may not have access to the mobile phones. So while there's a huge advantage in a mobile first authentication system or mobile first ecosystem, the transition to mobile only ecosystem or mobile only authentication is going to take time, and then for all good reasons, right? But that's inevitable. It is going to happen, maybe in a decade or 2 decades, but that's going to happen. Similar to, nobody would have thought in 2006 or 2007 that smartphone penetration would go so deep in just a decade, but it happened, right? And I think the mobile only authentication is again inevitable. It's going to happen at some point in time. But till then, transition phase, all businesses have a moral responsibility to provide non-mobile based authentication systems as well to all these users who may not have access to these kind of devices, smart devices. Now, it would depend on what kind of businesses we are talking about. If these businesses are around government ID authentications or government programs, there could be systems which can be actually brought down to local communities in form of kiosk where users can authenticate themselves using all these amazing signals which are available on mobile devices, right? But if it is about classic B2C businesses where businesses are focused on making money, probably we'll have to think about how a non-mobile first experience or an authentication system can still be opened for inclusion purposes to ensure these users are also able to access and contribute to the business. And yet, it's not opening loophole in our security for the fraudsters to actually leverage legacy forms of authentication to basically attack the system. So the transition period is scary, and that's where all the experts are together working to ensure the systems, the walls of the fort are still guarded, but it is the change is going to happen pretty soon.
It is going to happen. But again, Alok, to your point, what use cases? If it's B2C, mobile phone is your internet to the sorry, it's a gateway to your internet, right? You use mobile phone as an access to internet when you're doing online applications. If the focus is online applications, then mobile phone is a must. When it comes to government applications, as you rightly said, yes, you can have something in between. You might have just a national identity card which has a NFC built in it, which can basically do things. But again, when it comes to an authentication, and my idea was internet-based authentication for your B2C business, I think it makes sense to have mobile phones. But again, that's what my love for mobile phones. It comes from
Exactly. Just
I
to add
think
bits,
businesses. Sorry, go ahead, Yusuf.
yeah, just to add bits of both. I mean, Alok has clearly said very clear that this is inevitable, and
yes.
I totally agree on one point that it always depends on the services and the customer base which you are talking about. Rightly said, for the government's programs, because you have to give a service to identify the person that they are getting the right service and the right person is getting it, and that's a big problem for many governments, and also for the refugees, because you don't know if they are getting the right services provided by those humanitarian agencies or the government who are going to refuge give them refuge. So at this point of time, definitely mobile is one of the key thing which is anyway going on. But as Alok said, that this is a scary period of transition, and at this point of time, obviously, when we talk about government, I'm a bit biased about, because I'm dealing here with these kind of systems. So here, there's always the options which government has to enable or put some cost and some efforts on it. There is a right example about introducing these kind of smart cards or some kind of biometric solutions. Biometric is there. We are talking about biometric, and that biometric solution is there. Is one of the solution, and definitely these kiosks and those machines which can identify the person without using those smartphones could benefit. But definitely, if you're talking about non-government, most of the time the services, the customer base is targeted for those smartphone users.
For those platforms, absolutely.
Interesting. We are seeing B2G, B2B, and B2C, but I'm so curious about what's cooking at FIDO Alliance, especially regarding this topic. So,
Yeah,
June, any insights?
this is very tough questions, and I think there are two sides, right? One is account recovery and taking after the people who are under the poverty line. So the later one first, right? So I have a story to share with you. Over the last 3 years, Father Alliance, we at the Father Alliance, we ran a program called the Developer Challenge or Hackathon. Mainly its focus is the educating and identifying the young university students or venture companies, and help them to implement and deploy FIDO authentication and make it stronger and easier for users. But the last year, not this year, but last year, we had a team. They are consisted of 3 men. Two of them are developers, engineers, and one of them comes from WHO. He was like a healthcare specialist located in one of these underdeveloped countries. And then the team came up with some kind of a proof of concept project, introducing a smart health insurance card, that can link to DID technology and along with the FIDO authentication. So, at the final stage, when we were doing an evaluation, everything went so well. And then judges were asking the question. We were enjoying the conversation. And then one of the judges asked, so that's fantastic, giving this fantastic the technologies to people who are in need. That's great. But what about those who cannot afford the, at least like $20 or $30 mobile phone? What would you do? So this guy, the young man who worked for the WHO, he took a pause, right? Very tough question, right? Even we cannot even answer, right? And then he said, his imagination is that if we can, if we can, that's true. But if we can, have some sort of like starting point, if we can make happen to at least one of the young entrepreneurs in that country that he's in, and then make him or her successful in terms of like e-commerce and banking, financial things like that, by giving her or him online identity, then he's so happy. And then he called it a starting point, and then he also called it as like a waterfall effect. And then he will bring it to his neighbors, his friends, and then his colleagues, and so on and so on. So, it's not perfect answer, but I thought, that was a good answer with a tough question.
Yeah, we have to agree it's really tough. And yeah, especially when I know where I come from, Uganda, there is that hindrance as well. But we still have to make sure there is inclusion and everyone is covered. So I'm pretty sure we've come to the end of our session. Thank you so much, our dear panelists and our viewers out there. We hope you really got a lot of insights as much as I did as well. I enjoyed the session. I got to know how different people really think about the current pain points happening in the authentication world. Within 1 minute, I would love to ask our panelists to wrap up and share just one message out there to the viewers watching us. Jeremy?
Oh, okay. I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I think my prediction is that technologies are always going to be there, and yeah, the hardware will follow. But definitely for me, I come from a pharmaceutical, so definitely risk is something that I really think about very much all the time. We're going to experience some push from either the government or maybe a FIDO alliance or maybe a huge conglomerate of companies to come up with a framework, I guess, because these technologies are gonna and they're all going to come at the same time. So we need to be sure what's the best solution out there. How do we ensure the data is protected, and how do we make this inclusive for everyone? So thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Alok.
Yeah. So great discussion today. We talked about mobile authentication. We talked about biometrics. We talked about inclusion as well. What we need to ensure in authentication systems or any kind of authentication technologies, some of these parameters are met. Any technology would be able to survive and would be able to serve the customers if it is secure enough. Obviously, if the user experience is good, if the authentication can happen with cost at scale, as well as the technology is reliable. Gone are the days when we can say the technology is secure enough, let's use that. I don't think customers of today are ready to accept it. We touched on this particular aspect in the start of the conversation. It has to be very secure. It has to provide the world's best experience. For businesses to adopt the technology, it has to be cost effective at scale as well, and reliability is given. So as long as these parameters are checked, all four checked, I think things are sorted. So that's for me. Thank you so much.
Perfect. I'm with you there. Abhijit?
Yeah, again, a great panel. As Alok and Jeremy said, great insights into what governments are doing, great insights into what FIDO is doing, and what actually the super apps are doing. My takeaway, very simple. User experience and security goes hand in hand. We need to have a secure solution, but then end user experience also matters, especially in this digital world. I think digital identity-based solutions will be getting very popular because as we expand our digital footprint, there will be enough attributes like an IP, like mobile number, like a device ID, which will help us to evaluate and authenticate an end user. The most important thing is it has to be during the entire customer life cycle. when you onboard a customer, you need to identify risk associated with with that particular customer. At the same time, it needs to be rechecked time and again. Again, the time can be a month, 2 months, 3 months, but you need to basically re-verify or authenticate, keep on authenticating an end user at every transaction, at every periodic level, so that you are able to achieve both. One is a saving in costs, a better security, at the same time a better user experience. So from that perspective, that's what my takeaway has been, and that's what I firmly believe.
Cool. Just 1 minute left. Yusuf.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed the conversation, even hearing different aspect. I quickly wrap it up with the message that yes, as we are all aligning that the security and the usability are going hand in hand. So this something has to be continued. Uh, at the same time, we are getting more and more authentication, strong authentication mechanism. At the same time, this has to be this has to create a perfect balance between the usability and the security. At the same time, it also should not be penalizing the organization to adopt those technologies. It should be always seamless, even for the adopters of those technologies. That's a take from my side.
Interesting. So we are all rotating around the same point. User experience, security, adaptability, cost effectiveness. I'm curious if June has something different as a takeaway.
I have something very different from everyone. I have an advertisement to make. I'm sorry, I have to do this as a fatherland staff. So we are hosting a virtual cross-regional APEC event in early December. It's called the Authenticate Virtual Summit APEC Innovation. We are covering China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and all the ASEAN countries. So, simply Google Authenticate APAC or visit our website, authenticatecon.com. And please join us. You will learn more about how the trends of a strong authentication in this region.
Sure.
Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. One more thing. I would love to invite you as well to join the Centralized Identity Foundation. We are working around solving all these things we are actually talking about in this panel. So thank you so much, everyone. Thanks to the viewers. Please tune in to the next session. Thanks to our dear panelists. It was nice having you on board and sharing your insights. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. A pleasure talking to you all.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye bye, everyone.